John Eastep, Hell Yeah podcast presented by Garage Bar Sports. We
Hell
are
yeah.
going to do a quick review on the Houston game from what about a week ago or so at this point.
The Houston debacle, I think, is
The
more like it.
debacle, yes, that was terrible. So we're going to go through that. We're going to highlight some key matchups for the upcoming game this weekend, 3:30 ESPN. It's a big one. It's a big one in the conference, kind of a separation Saturday type of moment. And then we're going to go around the Big 12, where we're going to talk about some of the upcoming games. We'll pick our bet selections. But, John, if we take a look at that game against the Houston Cougars, what was a debacle of sort at the end. Talk about a range of emotions where we
What
all
was so
went from
frustrating to me, Jarrett,
elation.
was during the game we looked like the better much of the game. Like the first half
Much
was dominated by us.
the whole
Houston
game.
was able to get in that touchdown right at the end of the first half, and then they were able to run back that kickoff. But other than those two things, West Virginia looked really solid. Not looked smart, looked like we came to play. CJ Donaldson looked much better than he had in the prior two games. Things really gelled, and I felt, notwithstanding the score and that we ended up going down right before half, I felt good. I thought we're going to get this is going to be fine. West Virginia is the better team, clearly more talented, and I thought better coached. Second half, the defense they were able to make some good plays. Donovan Smith, you've got to give him a ton of credit. He I think completed his last 11 passes or so, and just found wide open guys all night. And beyond that, was able to scramble several times and break tackles and get downfield when we probably should have him stopped. And so I thought his play was phenomenal. But notwithstanding that, so you go down 11 or so, right? I think we went down 11 at some point. We were down 11 with like 6-7 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And West Virginia, after they gave up that Houston score to go up 11, then didn't we get a penalty or something? I think we started way back and had to go a long way down the field. And we ended up scoring both those, getting the 2-point conversion, and then taking the lead with 12 seconds left on a 4th and 10 play, no less. It looked like they were just totally dead in the water. And then to have it ripped away from you like that, it's hard. It's hard to be from my perspective, it's a little too hard to be too angry about it, just because we got pretty fortunate. Now we made a play, but we got pretty fortunate to take a lead. So I don't know.
Yeah, and the flip side of that,
it was a tough next 48 hours, but after that, you start to think about it and you're like, all right, maybe it was kind of fluky. What can you do? Really?
It was fluky, a lot of it. And we talked after the game, and I truly believe that if we play them 8 times in Houston in that type of environment, or 10 times, we win 8 of them.
Or even maybe more than that. I mean, it may be like a situation where you play 100 and you win 99. I mean, I think we beat them most times down there. I think we were ready to play, better coached, in large part. And then we just didn't. The defense didn't play well. That's for sure. And Neil thought they really underperformed. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was right. Defense and special teams let us down. So we'll see how the Mountaineers can bounce back. And that's one of my keys if we transition now from the Houston debacle to moving back to Mountaineer Field with homecoming. So that just gives you a little bit of extra juice right off the bat. We're wearing the traditional uniforms, which Mountaineer Nation is always excited to see. And I am just excited for this game, for the fact that this is the moment where you start to separate who are the contenders and who are the pretenders in this league. And I am really excited to see if the Mountaineers, who we are. I think there's still some questions and debate, and same with the Cowboys.
Oh, there's definitely
debate. They've started to turn their season around, but now they're back on the road. And even Gundy talked about coming to Morgantown. Is they act like this is some third world country, which I've never quite understood. I mean, you and I went to Kansas last year, and it was like the easiest trip in history, and it was
Gundy
even
was
a
pretty
ice
outspoken. Yeah,
storm. So
Gundy was pretty outspoken. I remember when West Virginia first joined the league, because he said something about the travel. I think he was one of the. Everyone else was just puffing it, building us up, and it was a bunch of puffery. And West Virginia's great, and we're thrilled to have them in the league, and they're better than Missouri at this or that. And Gundy, I think, was said, we're glad to have them in the league, but it's pretty far to travel, something like that. But to be totally honest, Oklahoma State has played really well in Morgantown. That's just
they have
the fact of the matter. They haven't lost a game since 2013. That one we were really fortunate to win. In a game where we had
that was a big upset
season. I think we had a losing season that year. If I recall, that's the year we got waxed against Maryland and Baltimore and maybe had 50 yards of total offense. And since then they've had our number. They've had our number the year that we had. So if I'm remembering it correctly, Jarrett, the year that Dana went 10-2 and he lost only to the Oklahoma schools, did we lose both of those at home? I think that's the year we played OK State at night.
We lost Oklahoma State. It was mid-afternoon. It was like 3:30, I want to say.
Oh, so
it was midday. Midday game. No, it was a home game. Oklahoma State. It was nationally televised. Yeah, the game.
No, I'm remembering
Oklahoma,
one. Are you thinking about the one that we ran back? Do you remember? Yeah, I knew that one. But at the Oklahoma State game, are you thinking of the one where we ran back a pick?
Yeah, we had two. We had two defensive,
and
one blocked punt.
Yeah, that was a different year, I think.
Was it?
So that would have been the year we had Kenny Robinson, and that would have been 2017, right? So that was Will Greer's first year.
They all run together, don't they?
Yeah, they run together. But that was Will Greer's first year. That was the first year that we had Jake Spavital as OC.
And the point remains, they have played well, and kind of funky things have happened in Morgantown. I mean, I remember just a couple of years ago when they were coming in, and it was the Chuba show, and that's exactly what they did. They totally focused on Chuba throughout that game. Now he plays for, I think, the Panthers, and is still performing well for them. So they have some athletes, and traditionally they have just jammed us up at the line with the man-to-man defense and their cornerbacks, and we've struggled to create separation. And that has been a consistent problem against the Cowboys. That changed a bit last year simply for the fact it was a bad weather game. And Nico comes in.
Which we might see this weekend.
It's going to be very similar. It seems like every year right now we play them, and the weather is just some type of it's like this misty, hopefully the misty taste of moonshine. But we're gonna see how it works out here with yet another game where it's going to be, I think, a little bit of a struggle to pass, simply for the fact that the weather could be an issue. And that's exactly what we saw on the road last year. It was just bang your head against the wall running game, and who can break away a few runs and seal the deal. So,
well, West Virginia would certainly like a game like that. I don't know that we'll see it again. I'd hope that our offense could continue some of the momentum they had last week and carry that forward and see Garrett go out there and throw a little bit. But to your point about us being able to get separation from their secondary if they're going to come up and press, I think we're not really, from a personnel perspective, in a great position to counter that type of defense if they're going to do it again, because we have some physicality in Carter, although I don't think he plays as physical as his stature. And beyond that, we have a bunch of small guys. So, and not all that fast. I mean, Hudson Clement once he gets going, is pretty fast. And then Traylon Ray showed some speed on a trick play with the flea flicker last week. So maybe you try to get him past that pressure up front. And then you have EJ Horton, who is the burner, and I think the coaches would tell you is the fastest receiver on the team. But beyond those guys, and that's, I know I just mentioned like 4 out of the 5 receivers, so don't really mean beyond those guys, but those guys themselves, I don't think are really the type of player that West Virginia has succeeded in really hitting some deep balls against OK State. If you remember that game, I think it was probably the 2016 game, but whatever game Mario Alford, maybe it was even before that. One of the last times before last season we had won at Oklahoma State, and Alford had basically what was a post route, maybe 15 yards down the field, and went for 75 yards for a touchdown. And we had a second long pass that game as well. And that's kind of what you need to beat that man coverage. You have to win on man against man, and we'll see if we'll be able to do that. Part of that's going to be dictated by what the weather conditions are like too.
Certainly. Yeah, another matchup that I'm interested to find out. How does Alan Bowman, we've seen him before. He was at Texas Tech prior to transferring. He then transfers to, I think he was at Michigan. Then he leaves there, goes to Oklahoma State, so back in the Big 12. And I'm really curious to see how he performs in Morgantown. So, excuse me. So I'm excited to see how Bowman comes back. We've seen him in a very different system than what he's going to be playing. And as I was looking at the Oklahoma State Cowboys and some of their statistics, I was going back to early Gundy. When he first arrived, or early in his tenure in Stillwater, did he not have just offensive firepower galore? I was thinking about some of the former receivers that he had, Justin Blackman. I can remember just countless plays that some of his big-time receivers, they were always in the running for the Biletnikoff. He had quarterbacks all over the place. And short of Chuba, he's had some players, but the explosive firepower of them, let's say 5 years ago and prior, hasn't really been there. So that's
he hasn't been able to keep it up.
Yeah, I started looking at it and I'm like, I didn't realize that it was like, the same Bowman.
Can you name one player there that, like, over the past 5 years beyond Chuba that was a really good skill position player that stands out as an all-conference type player?
They had the receiver from, I forget if it was last year or the year before. He ended up sitting out the tail end of the year. And we started to see that with some of their players. Even the Chuba year, he was disgruntled there and was threatening not to play. Is he going to play? It was one of those types of deals. So they've been hit hard by the transfer portal, certainly.
Well, to that point, I mean, earlier this year, it looked like they lose to South Alabama at home, and you think this could get really ugly in Stillwater. And there were rumors that were circulating about players quitting the team and that type of thing, and doing the kind of forced red shirt and trying to hit the transfer portal. But, you know, quite the opposite has happened, and they've turned it around. So credit to Gundy. I've always thought Gundy is absolutely one of the best, not one of those most magnanimous coaches in the league. I don't think he has a lot of really close friends with other coaches, and opposing fan bases don't love him. He's not one of those guys like Bill Self on the basketball side at Kansas who's going to give you all the credit in defeat. And you know, he'll rarely do that. Doesn't talk a lot about the other team. I watched his press conference this week, and he's like this every year. He rarely will say anything about the other team. It's all about him, and that's totally fine. But he's not the most likable coach in the world. But man, is he a good coach. And he had some chances to go some places too. And you wonder if he regrets that now that things have kind of stagnated a little bit. But he is an OK State alum and played quarterback there, so he's probably content in his decision making. But to your point, he
reminds me of Narduzzi at Pitt. Just
in what way?
With some of his press conferences where he doesn't really talk up the other team. It's all about their team. When I hear him, that's kind of the vibe that I get, I guess.
Yeah. I get some of that too. But he's a heck of a coach, good offensive coach.
He is, and very underrated.
Haven't been able to put it together. It'll be a challenge this weekend.
Yeah, interesting thing as I was looking through just some of the stats, you have to go down to the 20th receiver to find a Cowboy listed in Big 12 receiving standings, and that's Jaden Bray. That has not traditionally been the case from a Cowboy offense coming in here. So again, we talked about this last week, Beanie Bishop. Beanie still remains at the top of the Big 12 standings in passes
even though he had
defended.
a really poor game against Houston. Poor game.
It's just the entire defense. It was
gave up an
a
awful
debacle.
touchdown right before half. I think that's the touchdown to Sam Brown where totally misjumped the ball and mistimed his jump rather, and gave up a touchdown where that should have been defended. So hopefully he rebounds.
He's got to play better. This defense has got to get back on track. Beanie, so he is in 6 games, 9 passes defended total. So that again, that leads the Big 12 conference.
So let me ask you this, Jarrett. So I think one of the it's not an issue, but I do think we talked about the weather a little bit. I'm interested in your thoughts on what the attendance is going to be this weekend. You're coming off an uber disappointing loss. I think if you win that game, if Houston doesn't pull off the miracle that may have saved Dana Holgerson's job, by the way, if Houston doesn't pull that off, then you have probably a ranked West Virginia team, or maybe you're right on the outside of the top 25 rankings still, but you have a really fired up fan base. You're 5-1 with a chance to go 6-1. And I think even in a rain situation there, you probably put 58,000 people in the stadium, maybe more. But I don't know what you're going to see. This is the typical, and it's weird because it's we still have a good record. We've exceeded and outperformed expectations. People were obviously really down coming into the year, but you've only had one. This is going to be your one and only October home game, which is really surprising. October is a beautiful time of year in West Virginia, and people love going to October home games in Morgantown. And this is your only one. So will people take advantage of it? I'm leaning toward no, just because the tickets are not going crazy, and you can get in for a pretty reasonable price with pretty good seats. So I haven't looked at the seats still available from the university. There may be a bunch there too, but I'm not optimistic we're going to have a large crowd.
The vibe I have is the fan base needs to see more. And you were right there. You were right there, and I agree with you in that it's difficult to pin this on any one person from a standpoint of you just throw up a Hail Mary, the ball gets tipped in the air, and there were countless plays throughout that game that could have gone differently. But the point remains, you're 4-2, and you're coming back home now with a chance to go 5-2 and really assert yourself into the conference race. If you go 3-1 and you've beaten Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, who has kind of been middle of the pack type team, I really think, and the Houston loss, other than having a loss, you're not going to have a tiebreaker scenario with them. So you have a loss, but you still control your own destiny moving forward.
Yeah, in a sense. I mean, you likely do. I mean, I think that's going to be the thing. If Iowa State continues to win, you don't play them. If Kansas ends up being up there, you don't play them. Texas, you don't play them. So you could end up in a scenario, Kansas State, you don't play them. So you have like 3 out of the top 4 teams you're not playing. So all this talk about West Virginia's tough schedule, it turned out to be a very, very not difficult schedule, to be honest, which is why I think Neal needs to win 8 games against it. But
the counter to that is we play 11 Power Fives. We have one loss.
We do, but Houston,
State,
the team we just played is barely a Power 5 in my view, and they're probably not going to win another Big 12 game. They might.
Well, they're a 23.5 point dog against Texas at home.
Yeah, I mean, they just don't have the talent. If you looked at their secondary out there, it was like a bunch of 5'6" corners. They do not have the talent this year, and the teams we're playing are just. Yes, Oklahoma State's going to be more of a challenge than we thought originally. I think Baylor by the end of the year will probably be much more of a challenge than they showed early. But by and large, I mean, we really shouldn't complain about the schedule. Pitt is terrible. So we need to win. And I agree, the fan base is probably waiting for something else to happen here. But as you said, like, this is a hugely important game because you're right here with two teams that are 4-2. If you can give them a loss, get up to 5 wins, and then you're going to UCF, which is I don't know if you've seen any early lines on that, but we'll probably be, a dog, but not much of one. So I give us a real shot down there, particularly if we stay healthy on offense and Garrett Green's running around to win that game. And all of a sudden you're back in a potential conference race. So, and then you think back to that Houston Hail Mary and it's like, we'll make you sick.
Painful.
We'll see what happens. We need what happens Saturday, I think, will really determine how the rest of the season goes. And I don't mean you win and then you don't lose again, but I think if you win, you got a real shot at 8-9 games to win. But if you
disagree,
but if you lose, you're in deep trouble, and it may end up with Neal not being around next year. So,
and a really good bowl game opportunity as well. If you're looking for a guy to look at on defense for the Cowboys, it's going to be Nick Martin. He's all over the Big 12 statistics. So that's the guy, Martin. Remember that last name if you're at the game on Saturday. So, John, why don't we go ahead and transition a bit to around the Big 12 as we do each week. We focus on all of the conference games now that we're only in conference.
We do. So just one thing before we get there, I wanted to say, just before we get to the rest of the conference, because I don't want this to get lost. I'm not really a soccer guy. I hope that my neighbor who's from London isn't listening. But West Virginia has a good, I'll say great soccer program. For those of you who just follow football, basketball, or some of the other sports, West Virginia has a fantastic soccer program under the direction of Dan Stratford, who played at West Virginia and who was a coach at Division 3, I want to say, or 2. Maybe it's 2.
I think 2.
Division 2, University of Charleston, West Virginia, won 2 national championships there. Has come to West Virginia. I think he's now in his 3rd year, maybe 4th. I think 3. And he's won a lot of big games. They made the NCAA tournament at least 1 year. He has West Virginia ranked 5th in the country. His mentor, and I can't remember his first name now, but his last name's Grassi, also an Englishman who is the coach of the Marshall Thundering Herd, coached with Stratford at Charleston. They had fantastic teams, although I don't think they won a national championship there. And then Grassi goes to Marshall, and what did he do like 3 years ago? Win the national championship.
Won the national championship.
So Marshall comes into Morgantown last night, number 1 team in the country, sellout crowd, largest crowd for a soccer game at Dick Lesk Stadium ever in Morgantown for a beautiful October night. Ren Baker was there in his vintage bomber jacket that I saw in a Twitter. I saw tweeted. People were like obsessed with this and wanting to know where he got it, and he said, "I got it at Fanatics, but it's sold out," and blah 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 blah. But in any event, West Virginia played fantastically. Marshall had given up 5 goals all season in 12 games. They are the only team in the country who had not tied a game or lost a game all year. And West Virginia gave up the first goal to Marshall. Marshall scored first. West Virginia scored 3 unanswered in about 1 minute time. Ended up scoring 5 goals on Marshall and winning 5-2. We'll see what matters is what happens in the postseason. But West Virginia had a great win at home against Marshall. So I just wanted to say that. Congrats to Dan Stratford and the West Virginia men's soccer team. So thank you, Big 12 fans, for letting me get that out. And now we can. And the Big 12 doesn't even have men's soccer. We're in the Sun Belt, so we can transition back to Big 12 football now.
Worthy of the quick note there. That
yes.
That was a special game, and I also saw that all-time WVU in Morgantown against top 5 opponents is 6-1-1.
Yeah, and that may be.
Is that incredible?
Oh, is that all time? Yeah, and Stratford's won most of those, or 3 or 4 of those, I think, including one as a player, I think. So yeah, that's a great stat. And, with Nikki Izzo Brown and what she does on the women's side, West Virginia's played in a national championship game in the last 10 years and is a consistent Big 12 competitor, champion, and NCAA tournament appearances happen almost every year for that program. It's really nice to get the men's program going and have another team to follow, much like the baseball program that's really rolling right now under Randy Mazey. And it's nice to have sports beyond the Big Two.
So soccer in
Jared,
West Virginia is looking up. So circling back around, we'll circle the wagons here. And speaking of wagon, why don't we go ahead and start with the Oklahoma Sooners and Central Florida. Oklahoma, led by Dylan Gabriel, who played where before? Central Florida.
UCF, yeah.
Or yes, UCF as they go by. So UCF on the road at Oklahoma. The spread is 17.5. So big number as the Golden Knights go into Norman for their first game in Norman as a member of the Big 12 and will be their only game in Norman as a member of the Big 12.
What time is that game?
Who do you like?
What time is the game?
I had it up and we switched gears to soccer unexpectedly.
This is important for my
I moved that away. It is going to be 11 a.m. local kickoff.
Okay. I just don't think UCF has it this year. I think Malzahn is frustrated. I think they're going to get the doors blown off of them. I don't really give them much hope of staying in that game. Oklahoma is going to be coming off the high of a game against Texas. I think Oklahoma absolutely smacks them. And I didn't realize that UCF was there this weekend, but that's great. I'd love for them to go there and get battered and bloodied before West Virginia comes to town. So I'll take Oklahoma by more than 17.5.
So Oklahoma's going to be without Anthony, their star receiver, fourth in the Big 12 and in receiving yardage thus far. Dylan Gabriel, however, will be playing in this game, and I'm sure he would love nothing more than to go back against his former program and to have a good showing. And good showings he's had throughout this entire season. So, yes, I am with you. I like the Sooners big in this one in Norman.
And by the way, who beyond Brett Venable? I mean, Brett Venable, there are other coaches, I guess, that are in consideration, but you have to be thinking of Brent Venables being one of the absolute coaches who are in line for potential Coach of the Year award in the Big 12. I mean, they were horrendous last year. I know Coach Brown likes to say, point to that Oklahoma win at the end of the year. They were terrible. I watched them live in Mountaineer Field. They were terrible.
This is a good example of giving a coach time as they were transitioning systems. They were transitioning systems majorly. The way that Lincoln Riley went out of town in the middle of the night practically takes players with him, including his star quarterback. There was bound to be a bit of a rebound from that.
I agree with that.
Although it was a significant drop compared to the prior season. So
I
don't disagree that just.
Yeah, my point is it was a huge drop, one. Two, Venables is a weird guy. I mean, he's
odd.
He's really odd. So like you watch him, it's not like you have somebody in here that fits it, and you don't have to fit the mold to be a good college football coach, but he's a weirdo. And if you have a weirdo in there who does things differently, and all of a sudden your wheels start coming off, and it's like, holy shit, we hired the weirdo, didn't we? I mean, if you're winning, the weirdo is like, oh yeah, we got this mad genius like Holgorsen, right?
The Mad Hatter.
He won 4 games in 2013. His weirdness, his coughing every 3 seconds during press conferences wasn't too exciting. So I think Venables, he really deserves a ton of credit. He turned it around quick. They got a lot of talent in there, and he's done really well.
Okay, John, so we're going to switch gears here from the Sooners. We're going to go to the state of Ohio in a now conference matchup, the Baylor Bears and Chip and Joanna Gaines, they travel to Cincinnati to play the Bearcats in Nippert Stadium in a noon kickoff. That is on ESPN Plus. Cincinnati is currently favored by 3.5.
Gosh, that's a tough one to pick. Cincinnati was really disappointing, I think, last week. I'm not sold on Scott Satterfield. I think he was running from a little bit of something at Louisville. I know he was a really hot name. At the same time, Neil was hired and he was at App State. But I feel like App State, very similar to JMU, is one of those programs that can win because it's better positioned than and has better history and tradition and resources than its lower level competition. And you can go there and win. And I don't care. And hats off to Cignetti, who went into Huntington and won tonight for JMU. But those are just programs that are well-oiled machines. And Satterfield has not impressed me. So I took Cincinnati last week. I thought Iowa State was going to falter, and they've lost my trust. So I think Baylor is going to go in there. Aranda has shown that he can be a really good coach in this league. They've had a down year last year and have had some struggles this year. But I think Aranda will take his team in there, and I think they beat Cincinnati straight up in Nippert.
Yeah, I like the Bears as well. The Bearcats have just I don't know what it is. I think you and I both earlier in the season we wanted to like them, and Emory Jones.
I was just going to say, Jared, I assumed the reason I wanted to like them, I thought their talent level was going to be. I know they lost some guys. I maybe didn't pay as close attention to it as I should have. I know they would have lost some guys with Fickle leaving, but I had assumed where they had that program, and I knew it was going to be an adjustment still, but they played in a pretty decent league, and they had
an energized fan base
in that program to be able to sustain this jump, I thought.
It's not a huge stadium, but it's a tough place to play when you go in there and it's the blackout and all the excitement and buzz and fan base going. And they've just kind of fallen flat. And
I don't think they have the talent.
I mean, that's not something we have seen this from other programs that have walked into the Big 12 now. And from an outsider's perspective, I truly believe many of these programs, it's a larger jump than you realize. So we're both going to take Baylor to stay within 3.5 in Cincinnati.
Yeah, and I think
we're at Cincinnati. So then we'll switch gears and we're going to talk the state of Texas, where the Texas Longhorns go on the road and will face the Red Bull chugging Dana Holgersons fresh off of a Hail Mary victory over our Mountaineers. So the spread is a big one. It's a big number at 23.5, which I mentioned earlier. This is going to be a Fox game at 3 o'clock local time. So how do the Longhorns perform on the road in a game in which they're likely going to have plenty of fans there to offset the Cougar fans?
They'll have the majority of the fans there, I think, based on what we've seen about Houston's non-existent fan base so far this year. I mean, the West Virginia game was a horrendous showing on a Thursday night when tickets are going for $2 outside the stadium in your first year in the Big 12. Didn't even sell out your first Big 12 home game. I mean, they have a ways to go. And I know they're not pleased, but they've won a bunch of games like 2 years ago. So they should not be this. Look at where we've suffered through, So gosh, this is a difficult one. Just because I think Texas could feel a little wobbly. They're still really good. They lost to a really good team, but I think that they could be a little stunned by what happened last week and may come in because of how closely they played Oklahoma and the place where they found themselves in the rankings so far this year. They may go in a little bit overconfident. Houston does have really good skill position players. Sam Brown's a good player. Their other wideout's a good player. They could score some points on them. So I think if you run into a scenario where Texas, I don't think there's any way Texas is in serious jeopardy in this game. I would be really surprised. I can't envision a scenario where Texas has a couple of turnovers, and then all of a sudden Houston gets a couple of quick scores, and it's close for a little while. So I'm going to take Houston because of how large the point spread is. I think Texas probably beats them by more, like 21 points. But we'll see. We'll see. It could easily go the other way too. I think this is a difficult choice given the spread.
It is. I just think the Longhorns bounce back in major fashion. I think they're going to be fired up. They're going to have a lot of players that have grown up around that area. And I just think Quinn back on track for the Longhorns, and they go on the road into Houston and get a big win. So I'll take the Longhorns. So that leads us to Texas Tech on the road at BYU. And it looks like Texas Tech is favored by 3 on the road in the FS1 that would be 5 o'clock local time.
7 p.m.
in
Eastern.
Utah, 7 p.m. Eastern.
7 p.m. Eastern. I think I cannot believe Texas Tech is favored in this game. BYU is not good, but I just don't trust where this Texas Tech team is. They don't seem really solid to me. The way they were able to bash Houston, I know was not very good, but then come back and play the way they did last week. At home, I certainly don't trust them to go on the road and win this game. I would be surprised if they won. I'm surprised they're an outright favorite. I would take BYU all day long. BYU has a surprisingly underrated home field advantage. I mean, they pack that stadium all the time.
I agree with many of the points. The disagreement for me would be the running back for Texas Tech. We saw him earlier this season, Brooks, and he's a stud. Yeah, he's a difference maker. That I think he's ultimately going to be the difference maker in this game. And I would rate this as low confidence. I wouldn't even be surprised if it's a push at 3. But I'm going to take the Red Raiders. So we're going to differ in this one, John. And I've got you down for BYU. And I'll take Texas Tech.
Okay.
Guns.
And are these all the games you've gone through so far tonight? They're all Saturday games?
Yes. All Saturday games this week.
We don't have a game tomorrow?
No.
Okay.
So I'm making my notes as we go through and select these picks. That takes us to TCU on the road to Manhattan, Kansas, where the Horned Frogs have looked better coming off of a huge win at home against BYU. They now travel into Manhattan, where it can be a tough place to play. And the spread is at 6.5. It's going to be 6 o'clock local time on ESPN2, where Kansas State, they 2 weeks ago lost to Oklahoma State. They flip back around this past week and win a tough game on the road in Lubbock by 17. So here they come back. And how do they perform at home in front of their home fans this week?
Yeah, I don't trust TCU. I think Kansas. It would be a great outcome if TCU was able to go in there and win that game. I don't think they'll really come close. So I think the line's a little low. I think Kansas State wins by a touchdown or more.
And I just wrote my name down next to the Wildcats as well. So give me the Kansas State Wildcats to win by more than a touchdown. And that leads us to the game that we're focused on this weekend, which is a game on ESPN, 3:30 local time and Eastern, as the Oklahoma State Cowboys come into Morgantown, which seems awfully distant into the sunset if you're Mike Gundy and flying in an airplane. So how do the Cowboys make the ginormous journey to Morgantown and perform at Milan Puskar Stadium.
Yeah, Jared. So as we talked about, I think this is a really huge game for West Virginia in terms of how the rest of the season plays out. I have high faith in this team, and my mic just went out. Let's see if we can figure this out here.
So while you're doing that, I'm gonna follow up, and I'm gonna say that the Mountaineers win by a touchdown. We saw them go on the road last year and win a tough game in the elements in Stillwater. And I just think this team has something about them. They don't quit. They don't stop. They keep going. And we saw that last week kind of come back around, albeit in a Hail Mary. That's what, 1 out of 100 or whatever. So give me the Mountaineers to win by more than 3.5 in Morgantown for homecoming.
I agree, Jared. Got the mic situation figured out here. I think that West Virginia ends up winning this game, covers the line. I think West Virginia is going to bounce back after last week's game. I have a high degree of faith in this team and this coaching staff. I think there's just something about this team that we're going to show a lot of maturity and come back. And I would not be surprised at all if we're able to do that in a way that gives us the win by more than a touchdown or maybe in the 10-point range. So I'm going to take West Virginia to win and to cover the spread at home.
I like it. So we've covered a little bit of soccer. We've covered West Virginia, a recap on Houston quickly. We focused on the Oklahoma State Cowboy matchup, and we circled the wagons and went around the Big 12 conference talking about our best bet opportunities, or what we would select if we're betting these matchups over the weekend. Any final thoughts leading into homecoming weekend in Morgantown, John?
Nope, really excited to be there to watch the game, and looking forward to another weekend in Mountaineer football. Looks like we got a great slate around the Big 12 this weekend, so look forward to following those other games as well. Feel free to interact with us on any of the social media accounts that we have. If you have questions or if you have anything that you want to draw our attention to that happens, some crazy play or something like that in Big 12 play this weekend, be sure to let us know.
So like and subscribe. We're going to be in Morgantown, and then the following weekend, the Mountaineers go on the road to Central Florida, where I'm going to make the trip down for that game. So we've got some exciting Big 12 matchups coming up this weekend and a separation Saturday. Who are the contenders and who are the pretenders?
We'll find out. See you next week.